Like, I'd like to welcome everybody to Bloomington North Rotary this wonderful rainy day of cicada season 2021 on June 3rd. And I would like to start off by wishing a very happy birthday to our June birthdays. We have quite a few of them, and I noticed we've got, it looks like 3 on the call today. So I'd like to wish a happy birthday. Don't worry, we are not a singing club. I'd like to wish a happy birthday to Larry Keller, Bob Motley, on the call today, Vic Pagani, Jeremiah Young, Jody Hoagland also on the call, Dana Morrison, and finally also on the call, John Lillywhite. So happy birthday to you all. I appreciate you all turning 29 and holding. That is keeping our numbers in Rotary perfect. And then I would also like to wish a very happy anniversary to several of our members. So Joe Fuschetto, our incoming president, who can't make it today, but by God, he's going to be making it soon. He is celebrating 3 years with the club. George Carnes is celebrating 8 years with the club, 11 years in Rotary in general. Juan Carlos celebrating 13 years. We haven't seen him in a while. If you happen to see him this month, wish him a happy anniversary with Rotary and invite him back if he can have the time. Mark Dayton and Joe Morris are both celebrating 14 years. Looks like they got inducted at the same time. And Hank Bierman is celebrating 23 years with the club. And then finally, I have one very special thing I want to do today. Sorry to put you on the spot, Adam, but we're going to do it anyways. And that is, we have somebody celebrating their first day as an official Rotary member. We're going to be inducting Adam today. So, fellow Rotarians, today it is my privilege, pleasure, and honor to welcome Adam Beasley into the membership of our club. Adam, you have been invited to join the Bloomington North Rotary Club because we believe you possess the qualities required of a Rotarian and will present the ideals of Rotary to business and professional colleagues and the wider community. And I want to say that's not just because you're married to Julie, just like I was allowed in, not just because I'm married to Jessica. We both have good traits too. Sorry, for those of you not on the call, our wives are very active. We'll just call this the husband's club for some of us. Okay, so we also know that you are aware of and have accepted the obligations and responsibilities of Rotary membership. We know that you will find inspiration and service and enjoyment in the fellowship of our club and the worldwide Rotary movement. Once we're in person again, which I believe is going to be very shortly into Joe's term, I will be happy to present you with your Rotary name badge and a pin so that you can wear that proudly, designating that you are a member of Rotary everywhere that you go. Fellow Rotarians, would you please join me in welcoming our newest Rotarian, Adam Beasley, into our club and the Worldwide Fellowship of Rotary International. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Shortest speech ever. We love it. You're going to fit in perfect.
Julie's a speech giver, so yeah.
Welcome to my life. It's like we married the same woman, only different.
Yeah.
But yes, I very much understand where you're coming from, Adam. You'll fit in perfectly here. Let us see. I don't think I have any other announcements.
I have one, Brian, please.
Go for it, Jody.
I've got the final numbers for our wine fundraiser for our international project. So we had previously raised $650 for our whiskey tasting, our virtual whiskey tasting. So by ticket sales to the wine event, we made $1,300. Additional donations at the event, we made $2,340. So the wine event made $3,250 or $3,520. Flip my numbers there. We had the 650, so we have $4,170 to donate to the project of purchasing reusable sanitary pads for the schoolgirls at Nyaka in Uganda. Jackson has connected me with the Kampala Rotary Club, so we'll be figuring out how best to get them the money. But that includes $1,000 to pay the healthcare worker to do the 12-month study so that we can get some data on this. And then that leaves over $3,000 to buy the reusable sanitary kits at $5 a piece. So we're going to be able to provide a lot of those for the schoolgirls in the village. So thanks to everybody who participated, donated, whether you were able to be there or not. This is really awesome. And it also gets us connected with the Kampala Uganda Club to maybe do some things in the future also. So.
And the final announcement I have tonight, we all remember we had Jeff Wislich from Cardinal Spirits speaking last week. If you missed it, you can jump onto our YouTube channel and you're welcome to watch it. Zach, that goes for visitors too. It is an open channel. I think I posted the video. If not, I'll post it after today's session if I didn't. Anyway, he made a flippant comment at the end, which we have recorded, that we might be able to have meetings at Cardinal on Thursdays. He might consider opening up early for that. So I'm going to Cardinal for dinner tonight at 6. So if he's there, I might see if I can pursue that for Joe Fuchetto and the club until we can get in the tutor room. So we'll see what happens there. And I think that is my final announcement. Jody, would you like to introduce our guest speaker since you were able to procure her on the very last minute? And thank you very much, Kathleen, for coming. And go ahead, Jody.
So I've known Kathleen, I don't know how long. She's taught my kids. She teaches with my husband. She's many years been one of his lunch crew. My husband, while he teaches world history and European history, always tends to lunch with the English department. He said they're just more fun. So yesterday when I got, or 2 days ago when I got Brian's email saying our speaker had bowed out the last minute, we needed a speaker, I went to my husband and said, hey, Matt, will you talk at Rotary about teaching in the pandemic? He said, nope, but Kathleen probably will. So I reached out to Kathleen and she was gracious enough to say yes. I know what it's been like watching it from the side of being a spouse. Our kids are no longer in school, but watching my husband try to manage this over the last year and a half. But I'm going to be really interested to see what Kathleen's experiences are like since she teaches different things and how she managed to make it all work. So go ahead, Kathleen.
All right, thanks, Jody. And now I know who to blame when I see Matt again. So, yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, obviously, every school year, when you finish the school year, you have some time to reflect. But this year was a lot of reflection. So when Jody contacted me, at first I thought, well, that's really short notice. But then I thought, oh my gosh, but I am thinking a lot about this past year, and it would help me to sort of put some things down on paper and just remember this absurd year. So when I was cleaning out my room on one of the last days of school, I came across some excerpts from Charles Dickens' books that I use, Bleak House and Tale of Two Cities. And in Tale of Two Cities, of course, there's that famous quote, it was the best of times, the worst of times. But I was just looking at the rest of that quote. It goes on, it's quite a bit longer, but it has things like, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the epic of belief, it was the epic of incredulity, the season of light, the season of darkness, the spring of hope, the winter of despair. And when I saw that, putting that in the file cabinet, I was like, that is pretty much like this whole school year. So I thought maybe the best way just to explain what I went through and try to give a little bit better picture to what some of the other teachers and staff members went through was to go through the phases that we had of the school year. We went back and forth sometimes as often as every 2 weeks, but I just generalized them into red phase, yellow phase, green phase. So first I should kind of explain that in the before times in my classroom, it was very student-centered. It was very, there was a lot of group work. I had all the tables or all the desks pushed together into what I called pods. And the kids would name their pods, and they would always come up with these really clever names like Fairly Pottern Family and Pottery Barn and Pod Save the Queen. And so they would sit shoulder to shoulder, and we would have a lot of friendly competition between the pods. And obviously none of that could really happen this year. We also I have a back room with morning coffee and tea. We couldn't do that. We couldn't have any kind of food parties. And then something about those mandatory masks just seemed to mute everyone's ability to engage in small talk. I don't know if that I can't recall if that was true of adults too, but teens were just kind of shut down there in the beginning. So I teach AP Language and Composition, which is for juniors, Film Lit, and I also supervise the student newspaper. So I had, in my English classes, I had about 27 kids each. Film Lit was packed with 35 kids, most of them at home, including my son, which was kind of an odd experience. But so, and then my newspaper staff also in my day. So I had a pretty busy day of a lot of classes that I had taught before. But obviously we had to figure out how to do that this year. So the first thing we had just 5 days of trying to make this all work before the students actually started. So the first thing I wrote down is that on those 5 days, the anger and the tears were real. I mean, people were afraid, they were frustrated, they were overwhelmed. So the unflappable IT guy worked nonstop to provide trainings for us on how to record lessons, how to set up Microsoft Teams, how to integrate our existing slideshows into Canvas, which is our learning management system. So I should say a word about the crappy product that is Microsoft Teams. So I saw a survey recently that fewer than 2% of schools used Teams during COVID. You know, we're on Zoom, you're obviously familiar with Zoom, but so Teams was clunky. It kicked kids out of the class. It left them stuck in the lobby. It didn't allow for breakout rooms. And I do all this small group instruction. So it was really frustrating not to be able to sort kids into these rooms. So one day during this week, I asked the tech guy, why can't we use Zoom? And it seems like it'd be so much better. And he said, well, students could get on the Zoom link for one of their classes in the middle of the night and they could surreptitiously meet up. And I thought, what self-respecting teenager who has like Facebook and Snapchat and a phone is gonna like, hey, do you want to get on the algebra link at 2 a.m.? And so anyway, that was the official reason, but we weren't allowed to use Teams. We weren't allowed to use Zoom. So some of the other challenges of that first week is like, I think most teachers had a real mix of digital things and paper things. I had a lot of digital resources, but I also had novels in my room or collections of essays or handouts I had gotten from people at conferences that I just didn't have a digital copy of. So I think we all just spent hours scanning in all of these materials that first week. We also spent the rest of those 5 days literally learning like a training on a new product almost every day. They were really some of the hardest 5 days I've ever had as a teacher. Even the simplest things were now really maddeningly complicated, like taking attendance in a class now involved 5 different options, and you had to go through every single student and choose among 5 options, and then in each class to take attendance. Recording a classroom video was easy enough, but then you had to upload it to YouTube, make sure all the settings were right so the kids could see it. Then you had to connect it back to Canvas. Then you had to do that 5 times a day. So I'm also co-chair for our English department, and there were really truly days in that first week when some of my colleagues came into my room, a couple of them actually crying and said, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. And we really leaned on each other a lot to give each other pep talks that we could do it. I think the art and music teachers were especially bereft. How are they going to teach kids to cut stained glass or fire pottery in a kiln? The band instructor was like, how is the jazz band going to learn to play together? One of the poor gym teachers didn't know if she was going to try to deliver sports equipment to kids' houses or just ask them to exercise at home on the honor system. And one day during this whole exhausting week of training, I went outside and she was out by the softball field just aggressively pulling all these weeds and kind of cursing. And I said, Meg, is that your job now? Doesn't the custodial staff? And she said, I can't do this. And she just had to let off some steam. So somehow we got through that week of training, and then we started in the red phase. So some teachers taught from home, other teachers were in the building. All the students were at home. This was for the first month. The cafeteria workers were there at school. They packed breakfasts and lunches for all the kids. The bus drivers drove that food around to kids that needed it. The bus drivers also drove around some special Wi-Fi outfitted buses for kids that wouldn't have access to the internet. You'll see in the picture I have at the end, our rooms were not set up at all to do this. So you had lots of teachers with stacks of 14 and 15 textbooks high with our laptops on the top. We just kind of improvised whatever we could. It was really hard to learn about the students in that first month. At first, they were speaking on the Teams meeting, but then the vibe shifted to some unspoken understanding that only weirdos would speak. And so people just stopped speaking. So a lot of days I was just teaching to these little boxes of initials and nobody would say anything. I mean, I would ask direct questions. I would call on kids by name and it would just be silence. So a bright spot in my day was my newspaper staff, because I already know all those kids. They would talk, they would all get on Teams. They were frustrated they couldn't do things like their podcast, but they also took a lot of glee in the fact that they could give me assignments now because they weren't allowed to come in the building. So they would give me photo assignments to run around and get pictures of things, and then I would upload them to our system and they would critique them and be like, could you get something more close up or with more action? And I was like, people, come on. So they thought that was pretty fun. I think it also made them better student journalists in a way, because they had to really hustle to get interviews. They couldn't just walk into the cafeteria or the classroom next door and be like, hey, can I interview you about summer concerts? They had to really work to find the interviews. So during that red phase and the next yellow phase where we had a hybrid mix, I really thought every day, at the end of the day, I would typically open up all my lesson plans for the next day and I would sort of, yeah, okay, I've taught this for years. It looks good. This still works. I know what to do. And now my exhausting ritual was just to open up everything at the end of the day and sort of sigh and think, well, what can I reasonably do here? What just has to go? How can I still prepare all these kids for this AP exam? They're going to take a full exam in the spring, even though we're in this goofy, absurd situation. Also, just more technical challenges. I had the film lit class first trimester, and I have so many PowerPoints that have little film clips in them. And each time I wanted to go to a clip, it was about 5 steps to exit, go to the clip, enable the sound, go back, show the clip. And I sometimes at the end of a class period felt like I was like clicking more than I was teaching. The kids were really patient with all that, but it was pretty exhausting. So the other challenges of that red phase were, as I said, just not developing that classroom rapport with kids. So I teach this kind of challenging Brent Staples essay that in my AP Lang class that's called Just Walk On By. It's the subtitle's Black Men in Public Spaces. And we usually have this really intense conversation about that. And I thought, well, how am I going to have that conversation to little boxes of students' initials? I don't think people are going to feel free to really talk in a way that they should about that essay. When we got to giving speeches, also in the fall in my AP class, a lot of times students are really brave and they want to talk about things like defunding the police or not defunding the police or Asian American violence or just lots of really big topics. And I didn't know if they'd feel comfortable doing that again in this remote setup. So I also, I'm sure you've read a lot or heard a lot about the mental health struggles of teenagers this past year. And it was real. I mean, most of my students did make it through the year, but I had people who simply disappeared. They came and went from Canvas. I messaged them. I contacted their parents, their counselors. There were some people that we were pretty worried about. And I think that counselors started to do some home visits as things went on in the school year. And we just, some students just disappeared. So I think in a good way, it was positive in a way. I was never a super strict teacher, but to get these tearful selfie videos from your students at 2 or 3 in the morning where they're crying, saying, I don't think I can do this, and you get to work in the morning and you open that and you're just like, don't worry about it. Just, take care of yourself, take care of your mental health. Like, don't stress about these things. So somehow we got through this red phase and we came into this hybrid situation now where we're seeing some of the students for the first time. And this new student, Connor Coyne, he's actually the grandson of Lynn Coyne here in town. He just moved to town with an Air Force family, and he was hilarious. And he walked in on the first day of this yellow hybrid phase, and he said, I don't know about this. And I said, oh, what's the matter, Connor? Does this feel unsafe to you? And he said, no, both you and my calculus teacher are like way taller than I thought. And this is just blowing my mind. So kids had to adjust as they came in on the yellow phase. It was still pretty quiet. The hallways were quiet. Kids still didn't feel entirely free to talk. Lunch was the saddest thing you ever saw. The cafeteria used to be raucously loud with kids laughing and sitting with their friends. And now they were assigned to these like 8-foot-long tables with people they didn't know. So it always put me in mind of some 19th century novel where some penniless cousin comes back to visit the rich uncle and they sit at some huge manor table and they eat and they don't talk. And it just, you know, I mean, it got to a point where administrators were trying to think, could we take them all outside to eat? What could we do? But we couldn't really do anything at that time. And it was just sad. As we got further into the fall and winter, you know, faculty and students started to contract COVID. And that changed the mood too. I mean, each time a student was absent and we knew that it was COVID related, that janitors came in for a deep cleaning. And if the students came into my room right after that, there was just this feeling of just this kind of low level despair, like, oh, the person who sits there has COVID. I mean, you know, this is before we knew, obviously, that most teenagers, you know, are essentially fine after and recover pretty well from it. So we got through the yellow phase, and I adapted some more things. One day I just turned over my whole lesson to my AP students and said, I don't know how to make this work in this hybrid remote situation. You guys figure it out. And they figured it out, and it was beautiful. Kids met in each other's driveways and lawn chairs. They had phone calls that they recorded so I could listen to it and hear their discussion. They made videos. They got on Zoom, which maybe wasn't allowed, but they got on their own Zoom and they had discussions and recorded it. So the kids were really, you know, good about helping me figure out how to make things work. So finally, then we got into the green phase, the last several months of school, and the mood just lightened so much, especially when the FDA announced that ages 16 and up could get the vaccine. That morning, and I walked in my first period, every kid had their phone or their laptop open, and they were, hey, kid, did you get an appointment at Kroger? Hey, I found one in Assembly Hall. They all just wanted to get vaccinated immediately, and it just really lightened the mood. We had kids still going back and forth between online. You know, pretty regularly, I would have a surreal experience where a kid would walk in and walk up to me in a mask, of course, and say, hi, I'm Maggie. I'm in your second period. And it's like, oh, right. I've been teaching you for months, but I didn't actually know what you look like. So they were kind of floating back and forth based on what worked for them. So still in that last phase, the teaching was just, it was so hard. I couldn't move away from my desk, because if I moved away from my desk, then the students at home couldn't hear what I was saying. And if students in the back of the room spoke, I had to repeat everything to the students at home. So even though the discussions got better, I would have to, Xander would make a comment in the room and I'd have to go over to the mic and say, Xander just said he thinks George Orwell, and then go back and forth, back and forth. Another teacher called it teaching from the penalty box, where you're just stuck in your desk all day and you can't really move around to where kids are. So really, truly, the last, I would say, 6 or 7 weeks of school, when we had most of the students back, the mood was completely different. The secretaries started playing dance music on the PA in between classes, like full volume Quadrophenia, the Who tunes. Like, kids were kind of dancing down the hallways. My whole newspaper staff came back pretty much, except for I think 2 students. And I just want to this is the last thing I'll just leave you with, and then I'll show you the little 20-second video of them. But so my newspaper staff had a white conservative guy who's going to West Point in the fall, a black, gay, super liberal guy who moved here from Detroit, some girls, feminist girls who love to argue about everything, a kid from the Netherlands, and a kid from Germany. And once they all came back in person, the conversations were incredible. They sparred over things like Brexit and national health care. And the one who was going to West Point always wanted to call the girls ma'am, and the girls didn't want to be called ma'am. And one day they just had like a 25-minute conversation about that. So it was really, that last 6 weeks was like finally like, oh, this is what I remember that I love so much about teaching. This is those kind of unscripted moments that are really just make it all worthwhile. So I'll show you, as I said, just a couple of pictures. I have 3 pictures, and then I'll show you the last slide is what happened in that newspaper class on, I think, about 3 days before the end of school. So let's see if I can pull this up here. Okay. There we go. Can you guys see some slides? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we do.
All right, great. So let me put this on view. So this is one of the social studies teachers, as I mentioned, during the red phase, with all the kids are at home. She's in her classroom. She's got that laptop up there on the stack of things, stack of books. And then I think we all grew just incredibly sick of these videos of ourselves. You imagine that every single day, hours a day, you were recording videos of yourself. You know, and then you'd mess up and you'd accidentally say some curse word. You'd have to go back and edit that out. And so this was just like, oh, like never want to do that again. And then this is the hybrid teaching, when we had some students at home and then some students in the room. I mentioned the problems with the mic. This was a better day, actually. Poppy the dog attended over there. Poppy came a couple times back in the fall. So that was pretty good. And then here's, oops, yeah, here we go. So here's my newspaper staff. Oops. Oh. So that was when they realized in the last couple of weeks of school that they were all vaccinated, and they just put the speaker out there and started dancing, which I thought was just pretty beautiful to see. So
Was that West Point and Detroit dancing together?
That was Detroit and the kid from the Netherlands dancing together. Yes, but that would have been even better if West Point had. Yeah, they just had some great talks. So yeah, hardest year ever. You know, I think we, like all of us, we just learned to appreciate a lot of things that we kind of maybe taken for granted before. So
Kathleen, how many years have you taught?
I've been 20 years teaching high school now. Yeah. So yeah, and we don't know what things will look like when we start up again. Hopefully not that. We might still have masks, but everything else we're hoping will be a little bit back to what we're used to.
I don't know. I hope it starts with them all dancing again. I see Jean has a question, then Charlie. So go ahead, Jean.
I do. Do you have any sense of how your AP kids fared?
Yeah, that's a good question. They felt like the exam went pretty well for them. So on the exam, they write 3 essays and they do an hour of multiple choice. It's about a 4-hour exam. They said that it went pretty well. Once we came back in the green phase, I just went kind of hardcore on the timed writings and the test prep and the because College Board wasn't cutting them any slack this year. So yeah, but they said that it went pretty well. So I'm fingers crossed we'll get the scores back in July.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Mine was related. I just wondered how you did testing, and do you really think the kids learned anything?
Yeah, I'm fortunate in my class that I never had a lot of tests. I mean, in teaching film literature and teaching English, it was mostly writing papers, answering questions. I rarely had exams. The math department struggled, and they were constantly attending these trainings on how to do a lockdown browser to prevent students from cheating. But I don't know. It's hard. You have to give a math test. I mean, so yeah.
How do you have a chemistry lab?
Right. Yeah, those things it was much harder for some other subjects. And I have an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old, and they were at home most of the year. And yeah, my daughter was trying to do stained glass, with the sharp instruments and goggles on. And so yeah, I don't know about the testing. This poor students did have to come in for I-step testing over the course of 2 days. Even if they were 100% virtual, the state required them to come in for that. And they nearly all did. They were amazing. I mean, they sat for hours in the cafeteria and did this test that doesn't even mean anything because next year Indiana's getting rid of I-step. So, but we didn't tell them that. So yeah.
So I also, first of all, I'd like to thank you for coming today. And more importantly, I'd like to thank you for you and all the other teachers, all the hard work you put in this year. Being a parent of young children, I can attest to how challenging it was for the kids. And I can only imagine what it was like for you teachers. You do an amazing job under normal circumstances. And we're all very grateful for everything you did throughout this pandemic. So thank you.
I really appreciate that.
And secondly, I'd also like to apologize. I forgot to welcome our guest, Zach Flynn. For those of you who didn't notice, Zach joined us today. Adam invited him to attend. So Zach, thank you for joining us today. You're certainly welcome back. If you're interested in joining, I'd love to chat with you more about it sometime or get you an application and see if it's the right fit for you. And then does anybody else have any other questions for Kathleen?
Got one for Brian.
Go ahead, Joe.
The inevitable question is, what was the most embarrassing moment for you as the teacher and the students in their replies, or what was going on?
I'm so glad you asked that because I actually had that written down and I forgot. There was a day in about October when we were doing, we still had to do persuasive speeches. That's part of the standards. And I was trying to figure out how some kids in the room would do speeches and some at home, and they would need to share their screens, and some of them would need audio. And I had my laptop in the room balanced on all these books, plus I had the desktop on, and I had a presentation about how to give a presentation, and everything went wrong. There was feedback. The slides didn't work. The audio didn't work. At one point, the laptop fell off the textbooks. And I just stopped and I said, hey guys, I have an idea. Let's just record this and we'll call this what never to do in a presentation. This is like an F presentation. So that was actually really embarrassing. Yeah, and to be an adult in front of teenagers when you're up there trying to figure out why is there feedback, and kids are like, you're pushing the wrong button. They've already got it all figured out. So.
I also remember seeing a video of you, I think it was in the red phase, where you were teaching from home and your son snuck up behind you and scared you to pieces while you were filming.
Yes, he did that. He thought that was very funny. I actually screamed on the video while I was talking about rough drafts.
Kathleen, do you think, I know, the whole COVID thing raised a lot of inequality issues. And I know that you're kind of like Matt, you mostly teach honors kids. And so not always, but that tends to lend itself to kids who have a little bit better access. What do you think any sense of what's going to happen moving forward? I mean, obviously, high-speed internet, I think COVID has shown that high-speed internet is a basic human right, just like having water and, you know, those things that we all need. Do you any sense of how that may shift in the education system, or what
Yeah,
your thoughts are on that?
that's a great question because you're right. There really is a digital divide there and not only the students who didn't have reliable internet at home, the poor kids that were sitting in the McDonald's parking lot trying to do assignments on a phone. Not only that, but I think also some of our students, juniors and seniors, were told by parents that they needed to start working 40 hours a week during COVID. So they needed to help bring in some money for the family, and school might take a back seat to that. So yeah, I think Wi-Fi buses we had were a pretty clever solution to go out and park in neighborhoods where you know that people don't have reliable internet. But yeah, there's going to have to be something else, because I mean that's just a huge disadvantage for these kids trying to do anything without that.
Well, and I know Matt would do a video and he might do it here at home, but then he would almost always go into the school to upload it because I, you know, we're zoned county, so we've got the best internet we can have, but I'm on it working, and then he would try to upload a video and it would take 2 hours for one of his lessons to upload. And so he would go into school and he'd upload and that kind of thing. And he also had one of those moments, and I wasn't working this day, but I was sitting in the front room and I was reading and he was taping his lesson, and he said, you know, some European dude, don't say his name this way. This is not how it's pronounced. This is how it looks. This is not how it's pronounced. Be sure that you always say it. And then he said it the exact wrong way that he had just told him not to say. And I just start howling from the other room. And he's like, I don't need like, I don't need you to be making fun of me. But I just remember thinking, I mean, how tedious. And he also had, you know, students who, you know, stress levels I think were really high, for everybody, right? And
We
so
also, yeah, my principal sent me and the head of the math department up to Guerin Catholic School, to see what they were doing. And it was interesting, but I came back and I told him, I said, the things that are working better in that environment are because it's a private Catholic school. All the students at home are required to have their cameras on. I mean, we also talked a lot about the equity issue of, you know, maybe I don't want my classmates to see where I live. I mean, I had a girl who lives in these, you know, apartments across from the country club. Mom has no car. Mom's an undocumented immigrant from Haiti. You know, I had to take her some books on a couple of occasions. Sweet, hardworking girl, but maybe she doesn't want to turn that camera on and see that she lives in this very tiny apartment with mom and two other sisters. And yeah, so I think that just raised all of those kind of issues. And I'm happy that we were really, I think our school and MCCSC, I think, were flexible about that, just understanding that kids were in all of these different places.
Yeah, my daughter was in second grade at Lakeview and we had to do the online learning. And for second graders, as a parent, we had to do it with them the whole time. They don't know how to do all this yet. But they did have every student had their camera on, and I can definitely see where students would not want that at times, because it was definitely, A, it was distracting seeing all the other kids move. But then B, you could definitely tell there's a lot of inequality.
Yeah. And we always write personal essays in my class, and this year some of them were even more heartbreaking about, I mean, there were some family situations there that kids opened up to me in their personal essay about, but I would imagine they don't want their classmates to know, you know, that, you know, dad has an opioid problem and, you know, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, when a student does that, are you required to report anything there to anyone, or?
Yeah, if it's a, you know, child abuse situation, we're supposed to immediately call the Child Protective Services. If the other types of situations that we hear about from students, usually I try to talk to them a little bit more one-on-one the details, and then immediately contact the counselor. And sometimes the counselor and I together will set up a meeting with them. But certainly, I mean, students do, and maybe even more so this year, they just open up to you in a way that, you know, I mean, they send you messages, like email messages late at night, just, you know, sometimes with fairly shocking things that have happened in their family. I mean, one girl spent probably a month not doing any assignments, and what's going on? What's going on? You know, everyone in her family had COVID and she was taking care of all of them. And she was working at like Taco Bell or something. Just time for school. And I think she was a little embarrassed to say that at first. So yeah, but yes, we to the counseling staff when we hear things like that.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Kathleen? Well, I'd like to thank you once again, Kathleen, for coming today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.